welcome to Late Night Tea with Dr. G. Good evening, guys. I miss you, of course. And tonight, we're going to be talking about determining legalities for 121 dispatch release. So this is going to be review if you've already had laws and regs. If not, it's going to be new. So if you do have your FAR, FC, and your FARA, you can grab those. If you don't, just go to the FAA website and go to regulations and then click current, and then you'll see that you can access the regs. And I have posted this PowerPoint slide on D2L. I'm all cozy with you guys. I got my fireplace going, my herbal tea, and I picked dandelions in the yard and put them in there. I've been doing some research on foraging. Part of the self-quarantine activities. So I hope you guys are finding some joy and some peace during this time. And let me know how you feel about my videos. If there's something you want me to do different, or something you want me to add, or just if I need to improve. I'm wanting to make this as enjoyable for you as possible. So let's get started on determining legalities for 121 release. Okay, so this is all leading up to doing our standard weather briefing. So this is one part of it. And I have the questions listed here that we're going to review. Can we take off? Are we legal to take off? Do we need a takeoff alternate? Can we dispatch to our destination? Do we need destination alternates? And really, this should have been the first question is, are there any MELs? All right. So let's start with an MEL. It's important to review those first, guys, if you're given an MEL, more than one. Oh my gosh. What am I trying to say? I'm not going to start this video over, because if I was in class and I stumbled, I would keep going, right? So what I was trying to say is sometimes you might have one or more MEL items on your flight. It could make it illegal to dispatch, even though it's on the MEL. Maybe you can't comply with it, and there may be flight level restrictions. There may be speed restrictions. So this is just important to verify. Check your MEL first. So let's review what an MEL is. MEL is minimum equipment list. So it's approved by the FAA, but developed by the aircraft manufacturer. So let's say you're flying a Boeing 747. There's an MEL for that aircraft, and there's one for Boeing 737, and so on. Each aircraft type has a separate MEL. An MEL is a list of items that may be inoperative prior to departure and still maintain airworthiness. So what that means is something is inoperative. It means it's not working, it's broke. Maintenance tells you. They give you a number, a system number. You consult your MEL, which is of course online. It's a PDF, and you see what it says. And if you can comply with it, then you can still fly with that item being inoperative. And it also might tell you how long it can be inoperative. Maybe it's only for one leg. So if it's only one leg, you don't want to send the plane out to a place where it's not, you don't have a maintenance facility, right? So there's like lots of considerations. The other end, if something is inoperative and it is not listed on the MEL, you cannot fly. It means it's not airworthy without it. So MEL is a list of items that may be inoperative prior to departure, so you haven't pushed back yet, and you can still fly. It's still safe to fly. Now, once something is inoperative during flight, guys, we don't consult the MEL, because it doesn't matter whether or not we needed it. We don't have it, right? That is when you consult what's called the QRH, the Quick Reference Handbook. That's for in-flight abnormalities, emergencies, etc. So here's an example of an MEL. It's system 34-1, and let's say that our MEL item is 34-1-02. Now, every MEL reads a little different, and there's always a legend that explains what everything means on here. But I'm just going to tell you how these look, because I'll be sending you these MEL, like this format. It's from it's for Boeing 737. And you can see it depends. This is for a Dash 300. This is for a Dash 500. This is 737, 700, and 800. So it depends on your aircraft. So I'm giving you system 34-1-02. So first thing, guys, on the left-hand column here, the number 2 indicates that there are 2 Mach airspeed indicators installed on the airplane. The 0, this next column, lets you know how many are required for departure, so we don't need either of them. This is for the 300 and 500, and then this C is called a repair interval category, and that tells us how long the item can be inoperative before it has to be fixed. And C is, in this example, is 10 days. Excuse me, which you would not have known that just by looking, right? It's a legend. I just happen to know it. So we look here and let's see. The Mach indication may be inoperative provided A, B, and C. A, altitude is limited to flight level 230 or below. Airspeed remains at or below 320 knots indicated airspeed. And it says to install a placard near the instrument per MEL Special Procedures number 1 placarding. So starting from the bottom up, placards, those are crew procedures. You pilots are allowed to placard. Basically, you just put a sticker over it and it says inop. When it said per MEL SP number 1, that's like later on in the MEL document. It's hundreds of pages long, and it tells you specifically how to placard. And then, of course, you know, we'd have to limit. So our flight level and our airspeed. As dispatchers, you're the one that's going to make sure your pilots know this, and you're making sure that you integrate it in your flight plan. Of course, pilots are just as responsible for it. But I will say, dispatchers see MELs all the time. And so for my future pilots out there, if you're ever in the industry and you're like, I don't really understand, like, what does that mean? Please ask your dispatchers. Do not ever be embarrassed to ask a question. We all forget stuff or don't understand something, and it's super important you understand your MELs. So if how do you feel about this? Is this making sense? So you got something broke before flight, you consult the MEL. If it's not on there, you're not flying. You got to contact maintenance to fix it, or swap planes or something like that. Or get a spare plane if your airline has one. If it is listed, then you just have to make sure you can still comply. I'll give you some that will say you cannot fly in known or forecast icing. So if you look, and we have forecasted icing, which we'll practice that later, but we talked about that already in this semester, then, you know, that would be a no-go. That would not be MELable, is what we say. Okay. So now, let's talk about regulations. So get out your FAR, AIM, because we're going to start with Part 91. You go to 91.175, paragraph F, Foxtrot. So first question. First thing you have to ask is, are we legal to take off? Are we legal to depart? It is based on 2 factors, guys. It's based on your number of engines you have, and then based on your number of engines, it's based on visibility. We do not care about our ceiling or cloud layer for departure. We just look at visibility. So go to 91.175F and go to number 2 and a little I. So 2 said, well, first F says civil airport takeoff minimums. This paragraph applies to persons operating an aircraft under Part 121, 125, 129, or 135 of this chapter. So and for this class, we're doing 121 operations. So now go to number 2, and it says, if takeoff weather minimums are not prescribed under Part 97 of this chapter for a particular airport, the following weather minimums apply to takeoffs under IFR. For aircraft other than helicopters having 2 engines or less, so 1 or 2 engines, it's 1 statute mile visibility. And then if you have more than 2 engines, so we got 3 or more, then it is half statute mile. So I also want you to know the RVR equivalents. Do you guys remember that? If you don't, you can go back to the very back of your FAR AIM to the index, and you can look up RVR equivalents and then find that in your book. But we got 2 engines. For this class, we're going to be doing the Boeing 737. So there's 2 engines. So our visibility required is going to be 1 statute mile, which is equivalent to 5,000 RVR, right? Do you guys remember what RVR is? runway visual range. It's how far down the runway you can see the horizontal distance, and it's in hundreds of feet. So if we look at our departure, let's say we're going to take off at 1600 Zulu out of Nashville, and Nashville is reporting a quarter statute mile, we can't take off. We're not legal to take off because we need to have 1 statute mile or 5,000 RVR. Now I have a note here, an asterisk, guys. In 121 airlines, every 121 carrier has what's called operation specifications, and they specify how the company will operate and be in compliance with all the regulations. So basically every rule I teach you here, guys, there is an exception that generally is lower for the airlines. So 121 carriers have what's called lower than standard takeoff minimums, and I'll let you know if we start using that in class, but to start with, let's just use the standard. But the lower than standard lets them take off as low as a quarter statute mile. And then if RVRs are reporting, they can generally take off as low as 600, some even lower than that. Because we've got touchdown zone, mid RVR, and rollout RVR can be reported. I like teaching you guys this because I know most of you are juniors or seniors. You're going to be close to doing an interview, an airline interview, whether it's 121 or 135, and you're going to have to understand their op specs, and I don't want it to be completely new to you. I want you to be like, oh, awesome, I already looked at that, learned it back in the day. It's always good to feel like something is review, right? Not fresh information. So we're done with the FAR AIM. I think the rest will need the FC book. So how do you feel about determining if we're legal to take off? You guys feel good? How do we know if we're legal to take off? It's based only on visibility. We got 2 engines. We need 1 statute mile or 5,000 RVR. 3 or 4 engines, we need half that. Half statute mile, which is equivalent to 2,400 RVR. Okay, so let's say we're legal to take off. We're legal to depart. Second question, do we need a takeoff alternate? And the regs call that a departure alternate. Okay, go to 121.617. And let's read this. So you guys have this. If you have your book out, get your highlighter and highlight it. It says, if the weather conditions at the airport of takeoff are highlight below the landing minimums, highlight below the landing minimums, in the certificate holder's operation specifications for that airport, no person may dispatch or release an aircraft from that airport unless a dispatch or flight release specifies an alternate airport located within the following distances from the airport of takeoff. Pause. Okay. So how do we know if we need a takeoff alternate? It said you need a takeoff alternate when the weather at takeoff is below the landing minimums. So you're thinking like, why are we looking at landing minimums if I'm taking off? Well, if you take off, guys, and something happens and you have to wrap back around and land, now we need to meet the landing minimums. So you might have a Jepson subscription already. Feel free to use those for your own purposes. But for the rest of this course, we'll be using the free government charts. And they are on airnav.com. So I just went here and looked at Nashville's ILS Localizer Runway 2 Center approach. And this is just the very bottom of the minimums. So these are your landing minimums. In order to land in Nashville, you have to meet these, right? It's based on your aircraft category, A, B, C, or D. We are category C. Boeing, Airbus, all of them are Cat C. The SILS means a straight-in ILS approach to runway 2 center. This one's straight-in localizer approach to 2 center, and this is circle to land. The first number here, guys, is 787, is in feet. And that is your decision altitude. And if you don't remember what that is, go to part 1 in your definitions and abbreviations. But decision altitude is the altitude the pilot makes a decision. Do they have the required visual reference? If they do, awesome. Continue the descent, continue the approach to land. If they don't, execute a missed approach. Now, the 787 decision altitude is in mean sea level. So we're really not looking at that when we're looking at weather. We're trying to decide, do we need a takeoff alternate? So we're planning ahead. We might be like 2 hours before departure. So what we're going to look at is this number here. The 200 is actually your decision height. And the height is the exact same thing, but it's in AGL, above ground level. We look at that because your decision height is in AGL. And when we look in our METARs and TAFs, the clouds are also reported in AGL. So we want apples to apples. And then the 24, you add 2 zeros, and that is 2,400 feet, and that is your RVR, runway visual range. So you'll have to find the equivalent. So the landing minimums for this one, guys, is 200 and half, because 2,400 is equivalent to half statute miles. The numbers here in parentheses are for the military. So we're determining if we need a takeoff alternate for Nashville. We're 2 hours out. So we're going to look in the TAF, right? We're going to look at the forecast. We can also look at the METARs as well, like look at that trend. But let's look at our TAF. And what we're looking at, guys, in the forecast is we're looking at our ceiling and our visibility. In order to not need a takeoff alternate, our ceiling would have to be at least 200 and our visibility would have to be at least half. If it's less than that, we can still take off. Maybe, it depends if we're legal to take off, right? But we can still take off, but we have to have a takeoff alternate. It's if the weather is below the landing minimums at takeoff. You need a takeoff alternate. Now, if you do need a takeoff alternate, guys, it makes sense that it would be fairly close to your takeoff, right? Like that's logical if we needed a place to divert to. So look back in your regs under 0.617, paragraph A1. And it says that your takeoff alternate has to be within the following distances. And again, it's based on your number of engines. So one says aircraft having 2 engines, it can be not more than, highlight 1 hour. 1 hour from the departure airport at normal cruising speed in still air with 1 engine inoperative. Number 2 says if you have 3 or more engines, it's the same rule except now they give you 2 hours. Not more than 2 hours, normal cruising speed, still air with 1 engine inoperative. It's a performance calculation. So we have 2 engines, guys, so our takeoff alternate has to be within 1 hour. Normal cruising speed, still air, 1 engine inoperative. We always calculate everything on worst case scenario, so that's why they calculate it as if you are only operating with 1 engine. In the real world, all your alternates will already be in your computerized system, and it will let you know which alternates are within that hour range based on your aircraft. So that's kind of nice. Let's see. So how do you guys feel so far? We talked about if we're legal to take off based on visibility, 1 statute mile or 5,000 RVR. Then we look at the weather forecast and we see if it meets our minimums for our departure. And if it is below the minimums, it means that we need a takeoff alternate. And if we do, we have to make sure it's within those distance requirements. I thought that I had a sample. Okay, another one. Okay, cool. Go back one. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the next logical question, we've determined we can take off. We've determined if we need a takeoff alternate. Now we have to determine, can we go to our destination? Can we take off and fly to our destination? So there's a few ways that we word that. So I kind of wrote it out here. A lot of people say, are we legal to launch? And I often say, are we legal to dispatch to our destination? So go to 121.613. Do it with me. Are you doing it? You guys have your phones put away, right? I see you. All right, 121.613. Dispatch or flight release under IFR or over the top. It says, except as provided in 121.615, which is flag and supplemental. It says, no person may dispatch or release an aircraft for operations under IFR or over the top unless appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination thereof indicate that the weather conditions will be at or above the authorized minimums at the estimated time of arrival at the airport or airports to which it's been dispatched or released. So here's the translation in English. Let's say we're flying to Miami. That's our destination. And we determine what time we're going to get there, and we look at the forecast or the reports, because there's a difference, right, guys? A report is current observations, and a forecast is predictions. So it says you can look at reports, forecasts, or any combination. And you look, and you're determining if the weather meets your landing minimums. Think about it. If it doesn't even make sense to take off and fly to your destination. Because then you get there, you start shooting the approach, you get down to your DA, your decision altitude, and then guess what? You can't see the runway. You don't see the touchdown zone lights. So you have to execute a missed approach. Then you try it again. You get down decision altitude, you still can't see what you're supposed to see. The forecast was accurate. Now we're trying to figure out, do we hold? Do we divert? So it just doesn't even, aside from the fact it's not legal, it doesn't make sense either, right? We want to make sure that the forecast shows we're going to get there and be able to see what we need to see to execute our approach, right, to land. And I have here, remember, the landing minimums are called landing minimums, not maybes, right? It's like you need to be able to have these numbers in order to land. So here's the same Nashville approach again. Our landing minimums for straight-in ILS is 787 feet MSL, 2,400 RVR visibility, and 200-foot decision height. So you check the TAF at 2020 Zulu. That's our arrival time into Nashville. The forecast gives you a 400-foot ceiling, and remember, ceilings are in AGL, and it gives you 1/4 statute mile visibility. Is this legal to dispatch? I want you to think about it for a second. The 400-foot ceiling, we cross-check that with this number, right? Because that is in AGL and this is in AGL. So we're good on that. But this is a 1/4 in the forecast, and we needed 2,400 RVR, which is equivalent to half. So the forecast is less, so we are not allowed to dispatch. We could not take off and fly to Nashville. You couldn't say, oh, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to hold until it improves. You can't do that, guys. You can't do that because 121.613 said you can't. Go back to that reg now. Look at it with me one more time. No person may dispatch unless weather reports, forecasts, or combination indicate the weather conditions will be at or above the authorized minimums at your ETA at your destination. So what are we going to do if we don't have it, guys? What do? We delay the flight. We delay the flight until we do have our landing minimums in the forecast. Or we cancel the flight, but ideally, you know, we'll delay it and see if it improves. Okay, so next question. The next one is, do we need a destination alternate? Okay, this is referred to as the 1, 2, 3 rule, which just probably sounds quite familiar, but let's look it up. 121, .619, paragraph A. No person may dispatch or release, may dispatch an airplane under IFR or over the top unless he or she lists at least one alternate airport for each destination airport in the dispatch release. So according to that first sentence, every single 121 domestic flight has to have a what? Has to have a destination alternate. Every single flight. Okay, next sentence. When the weather conditions forecast for the destination and the first alternate are marginal, at least one additional alternate must be designated. We're going to elaborate on that in the next slide. So just hold on that one. Next sentence. However, here's our exception. No alternate airport is required if for at least 1 hour before and 1 hour after your estimated time of arrival at the destination airport, the weather reports, forecast, or any combination indicates 1, the ceiling will be highlight at least 2,000 feet above the airport elevation. Above airport elevation, guys, is AGL, right? Not MSL, above ground level. And it didn't say more than 2,000. What did it say? It said it has to be at least. And then after that, it says the word and. And number 2, visibility will be at least 3 statute miles. So we call this the 1, 2, 3 rule. The 1 represents looking an hour before. and an hour after your ETA. The 2 is your 2,000-foot ceiling, and the 3 is your 3 statute miles. That's a 1, 2, 3 rule. If you can meet the 1, 2, 3 rule, you do not need a destination alternate. If it was exactly 2,000 feet and 3 statute miles, would you need an alternate? And the answer is no. Remember, it said at least. It didn't say more than. So how old do you have to be to drink? 21. Can you drink at 21? Yes. You don't have to be more than that. You just have to be at least 21, right? So this means if you look an hour before, an hour after, and this is all for safety, right? We're just trying to say like, do we think we're going to need it? Because guys, if we end up being in the air and we do need to divert, it's so much better to already have a game plan in place where you've said, here's where we will divert. We've checked the performance. We have the runway numbers. You know, we've got the fuel, right? So all this is for planning. So if you do need a destination alternate, we'll talk about selecting one in a minute, but then there's a follow-up question. Sometimes you need a second destination alternate. So that's what we're working on now. So if you looked at hour before, hour after, and you did not have a 2,000-foot ceiling or 3 statute miles, then you need to put a destination alternate on the release. Follow-up question to that is, do we need a second destination alternate? Okay, same reg, we just read it, it's a second sentence. So let's look back at it again. (121.619)A, second sentence. Get your highlighter out. It says, when the weather conditions forecast for the destination and, I want you to highlight the word and, the first alternate are marginal. Highlight the word marginal. At least one additional alternate must be designated. Okay, so it said the weather had to be marginal at 2 places. Your destination and your destination alternate. It did not say or. It said what? And. So, first, you determine if you need a destination alternate. That was based on what rule, guys? The 1, 2, 3 rule. Now, once you do that, then you determine you needed one, you select one. That's another story, right? You go out and you find a legal and safe alternate. The follow-up is, do I need a second alternate? Do I need a backup for my backup? If the weather is marginal at both your destination and your alternate, then you need a second destination alternate. But listen up. If the weather is only marginal at your destination and not your alternate, you don't need a second one. Or if it was only marginal at your alternate but not your destination, you don't need a second one. It has to be marginal at both. It has to be marginal at both. Marginal is defined in a company's ops specs. Every airline has a different one. I want us to use what's fairly common, and I want us to say marginal is a 600-foot ceiling, which is AGL, and or 2 statute miles. So it could be either one of those, and it is marginal. Does that make sense? And it can be at that. It doesn't have to be below it. So let's say you had a 600-foot ceiling and 3 statute miles. That is marginal. Like either of those parts make it marginal. So here's my example here. I'm asking you, is a second alternate required? We've got our destination is Orlando. There's a 1,500-foot broken ceiling and 2 statute miles. And then based on the 1, 2, 3 rule, we determined we needed our first alternate. And our alternate was Jacksonville, Florida, and the ceiling was overcast at 605 statute miles. Do we need a second alternate? What do you guys think? Yes, because the weather is marginal at both. So let's look at it. The destination, this 2 statute miles made that marginal. So our destination is marginal. Our alternate, the 600-foot ceiling made that marginal. So it's marginal at both your destination and your alternate. So you need a second destination alternate. How do you feel about that? That's a lot to take in. You might have to mull that over. Remember that we have discussion forums posted, guys, and feel free to ask questions there. and maybe other classmates can help, and of course I will help. If this feels a little rocky, that's totally normal. This is actually pretty complicated topics that I'm covering with you guys. And every single year, airline pilots and dispatchers have to have classes reviewing this because it's complicated. So you're doing a great job. I feel it in my spirit that you're doing good. Let's take a, did you get tea? It's time to take a tea break. Let's see. We talked about how to determine if we need a takeoff alternate. Remember, takeoff alternate, I would probably make separate note cards for these, by the way, guys. Takeoff alternate was if the weather was below landing minimums at takeoff. That's when you need a takeoff alternate. Destination alternate is when you don't meet the 1, 2, 3 rule. Now, what I want you to know is once you determine you need an alternate, now you have to select an alternate that's legal and safe and approved by your company, your airline, and then you put it on your release. Go to 121.625. And it says, except as provided in .624 for ETOPS alternate airports, no person may list an airport as an alternate in the dispatch or flight release unless the appropriate weather reports or forecast or any combination thereof indicate that the weather conditions will be at or above the alternate weather minima specified in the certificate holder's operations specifications for that airport when the flight arrives. So here's what that means, guys. I already told you what op specs were, right? Op specs, operation specifications. Every airline has them. It goes over how they're going to follow all the regs. Each airline has their op specs. There's a section that says what their alternate weather minimums will be, like how they will derive their minimums. It's not just what's normally published on your instrument approach, guys. Like looking back at the approach here, like it would not be 200 and half for Nashville because that published minimum or minimums are for destinations. Alternates, guys, need to have a higher minimum. Does that make sense? That is our backup plan if something happens and we can't go to our intended destination. So what I want you to know here is every alternate has to meet alternate weather minimums. Every alternate has to meet alternate weather minimums. Once you determine you need one, then you have to select one. Now, guys, if you can't find an alternate that meets the minimums, then you can't take off, right? It has to be legal and safe. Standard alternate minimums that I want us to use in class, guys, it's under Part 91. But for precision approaches, your alternate weather minimums, write down it's going to be 602. And non-precision would be 802. Those are your standard alternate weather minimums. 600-foot ceiling and 2 statute miles for precision, so ILS approaches. If you were going to shoot a localizer NDB VOR approach, that's non-precision. The ceiling needs to be a little higher, 800-foot ceiling, and still 2 statute miles. So every alternate on the release has to meet what? Alternate weather minimums, not just what's published. In the air carrier world, guys, in their op specs, they have what's called the 1 nav aid, 2 nav aid rule, and you actually derive minimums that way, and they are they would give lower than the standard I just gave you, but let's just stick to the standard for now. Okay, we're almost done. You guys are doing a great job. The last part, and this will be part of your weather briefing, once we determine all that, which we'll have to look at METARs and TAFs, if we do decide we're adding alternates, we obviously need to add fuel, right? To actually be able to fly to these alternates. So let's go to those 2 regs, 121.639. And 0.647. So 0.639 is fuel supply. And there's 3 categories. So it says no person may dispatch or take off an airplane unless it has enough fuel. And it's in this order. A, enough to fly to the airport to which it is dispatched. So basically point A to point B, right? Departure to destination, to arrival. B says thereafter. So that means you plan to be able to go from takeoff to destination. Then after that, it says to fly to and land at the highlight most distant alternate, where required, for the airport to which it's dispatched. Because I just taught you that sometimes you not only need one destination alternate, but you need two. I've had students ask me, well, how do you know if you need another? The reg only talks about two. You can do more if you want, but at some point you'll probably just be like, it's better to delay the flight, right? So part B is enough to get to your furthest destination alternate, which means if we have two destination alternates, we only need enough fuel to get to the furthest alternate. And then after that, paragraph C says we need a 45-minute reserve. Doesn't matter if it's day or night. For 121 domestic ops, you need 45 minutes after that. Now, what do we take into account for these fuel calculations? Because, guys, it's not just distance and speed. There's actually a lot of factors, and that's what .647 talks about. .647 are the factors for computing fuel. It says each person computing fuel required for the purposes of this subpart shall consider the following. What does the word shall mean? It means imperative, right? It means you must. You shall, you must. So it says you have to take into account A, B, C, and D. Okay, A is wind and other weather conditions forecast. And this is definitely something we'll be looking at for our briefing. How does wind affect fuel calculations? What would a headwind do en route? Headwind would increase drag and increase fuel burn, or increase our fuel needed, right? Ideally, en route, we want a tailwind. Decreases drag, decreases fuel burn. Less fuel, right? And we get there faster. So how would weather affect it? It said wind and weather. Well, let's say you're looking at your route and there's a forecast thunderstorm right smack in the direct route. Obviously, we're going to have to circumnavigate the thunderstorm. Circumnavigating or flying around it is going to require more fuel. Maybe there's severe turbulence in the forecast and we have to fly higher or lower, or icing. You know, whether we're higher or lower definitely affects fuel consumption. Flying lower altitudes would also increase our fuel burn, right? So we got to take into account wind and weather. Part B says anticipated traffic delays, which a great source for that would be the FAA OIS website that will let you know ground delay programs, ground stops, any national programs, and also just if you do work and fly for an airline, they will also share information on standard holding times and things that's going on for certain airports. So you can kind of anticipate, okay, we're going to be put in a 13-minute hold in LaGuardia or something like that. So part C, also you have to take into account one instrument approach, and you got to give them fuel for a possible missed approach. This is just for your destination, it said. And then D, any other conditions that might delay landing. So that's kind of an umbrella statement. So what is 121 minimum fuel? Minimum fuel was under 0.639. That's enough to get from point A to point B, enough for your furthest alternate if you have them, and then a 45-minute reserve. We do not ever touch that reserve for planning. It is there for our pilots if they need it. If something happens that we did not anticipate. Now, the 121 minimum fuel, there are factors that go into that, and that's this one, 0.647. Wind, weather, one approach, one missed, anticipated traffic delays, and anything else. Okay, here's what we reviewed so far. We talked about checking MELs. We got to do that first because that's a huge part of our planning, right? Are we legal to dispatch? Do we have to fly lower? Are there requirements that we can or cannot comply with? Now we start talking about legalities of flight. We talk about each step, right? Are you legal to take off? So I would make a note card for each one of these. Do you need a takeoff alternate? And if so, remember, takeoff alternate had to be within 1 hour normal cruising speed, still air with one engine and up. And every alternate has to meet alternate weather minimums. Also, any alternate has to be approved in your airline's op specs, right? All right, next question. We determined, can we take off? Do we need a takeoff alternate? Now can we go to our destination? Are we legal to launch? And that's by looking at our landing minimums, right? And then the last two questions, do we need a destination alternate? And if we do need one, the follow-up is, do we need a second destination alternate? And then we also reviewed the fuel requirements. I hope that this was helpful for you guys. It is a lot to take in. So think about it, review the regulations, and then I'm here for you if you need anything. I hope you guys are having a great night. I hope you're finding some joy in this online experience, and who knows, maybe you'll end up liking some of these virtual meetings. And I will see you guys soon. We're gonna do some live lectures soon because I want to see you guys. You can see me, but I can't see you yet, so we'll do that soon. You guys have a great night, and I'm here if you need anything. Please do not hesitate to email me. Don't think that you're bothering me or that you're being sending me too many emails or something. Just ask away. That's what I'm here for. I'll talk to you guys soon.